the most effective way to help our young people form their faith and build it to be strong enough to withstand the onslaught of the world is to bring the faith into the natural, everyday rhythms of the home. Hello, and welcome to Driving Faith. Today we're going to talk about the importance of private faith practices in the home. When we mention private faith practices in the home, I don't know about you, but immediately I begin to think of a formal family altar with Dad seated in his chair with all the family circled around him as he opens his Bible and begins to preach and lead in the family worship. That always intimidated me. And I found out that that's not necessarily the best way to incorporate faith into the home. Now, we will talk in later episodes about how to have family altar for different ages, but I want to talk about the natural daily rhythms of bringing faith into the conversations at home. Many years ago, I began to see people that I grew up with in Christian school. I graduated from a Christian school, and I saw many of them fall away from their faith. My wife and I, we got married, began to serve in ministry, and we saw this same thing happening very frequently. We began to wonder, what's going on? Why are some people sticking around and continuing to serve God, and why are others completely turning their back on the faith? And we began to look and began to investigate, and ultimately I decided I wanted to learn and get some more help from other individuals. So I began studying, went back to college to find out, hey, what can we do to help our families and to help our young people form their faith and make it strong enough to be able to withstand against the difficulties and the trials that they'll face. And in this study, I came across something that honestly should have been obvious to me. You've all heard of the Shema, Deuteronomy 6, where Deuteronomy tells the children of Israel to talk about their God. Well, first off, he says to love their God with all their heart. And then he says, I want you to talk about him when you're lying down, when you're sitting, when you're walking by the wayside. He tells them to write this command to love the Lord your God on the doorposts of their house and to put it as frontlets before their eyes. And I've heard that and we knew that, but what I found was that the most effective way to help our young people form their faith and build it to be strong enough to withstand the onslaught of the world is to bring the faith into the natural, everyday rhythms of the home. And that's exactly what Deuteronomy 6 is talking about. Talk about it when you're working on your car. Talk about it when you're making dinner. Talk about it when you are going to school or going to church. Don't just limit speaking about your faith during the typical or traditional faith times, like when we are going to church or when we're going to school. Now at Grace Christian School, we want to help your kids develop that faith, and we want to incorporate ways that we can encourage you in this. So how can we do this? How can we incorporate faith in the home? Let's look at some practical ideas. The first thing that I want to challenge you with is many times, if you're not used to this, and if you didn't grow up in a home where faith was regularly, routinely discussed, it may seem like a strange thing to just come home and say, okay, children, let's talk about the sovereignty of God. It may seem awkward to you. And so let me give you some ideas to think about how you can incorporate this in your house. Let me encourage you, first of all, sit down with your spouse and think about what are some things that we want to work on as a family. Day and I, my wife and I, there were many times that we would sit down and we'd kind of look at, all right, what is it that we want to work on? Now, there's a big list, but what we did is instead of trying to teach our children 40 things at one time, we decided, hey, what's something that we can focus on this week? And sometimes it was very practical things like getting along with your sisters. Sometimes it was like putting your toys back in their place. Sometimes it was something else. But we would choose a topic. Okay, we're going to talk about obedience. We're going to talk about this aspect of faith. But let's lock into this and let's have this on our radar. So that's the first thing I would encourage you to do, is to just have something on the radar to say, okay, here's what we're going to talk about. And then here's the next thing that I want to encourage you to do. If you have never had normal, regular faith conversations with your children, then let's just set a goal of starting out of once a week. Let's look for an opportunity. Let's stop for a second and think right now. What are some places that you might be able to speak with your child in a natural way about faith or about the applications of faith or how God interacts with what they are interacting with? A lot of different ways that you could do this. Let me encourage you, maybe if you've got small children, you've got elementary kids, I know this is tough to do sometimes, but instead of putting them in front of a screen, putting Bluey on and saying, okay, that'll take care of them, let me walk out, see if I can get this done, sit down, watch with them. Just watch the episode with them. Be looking for opportunities. What is this episode teaching? What are some of the underlying assumptions that are going on here? What's happening that you can stop and pause it and say, hey, what just happened here? What's going on in Bluey's heart? What did Woody with the woodpecker, why did he lose his temper? Now, for some of you young teenagers, Woody the woodpecker is something that your mom and dad would have watched a long time ago, and he had a terrible temper. And same thing with Daffy Duck, other people. You can stop, look at that, and say, hey, what's going on? Now, what could be going on in their heart? And you can introduce it. Then go back and watch the film. You could take a moment, you could do that. There's another thing you could do to maybe look for natural ways to talk about faith with your children. Find out what Bible verse they are memorizing at Grace Christian School. That is not given to them at last second. The teachers will give them ahead of time, and who knows what your second grader is memorizing. Look at it. Look at it, see what they're memorizing, and then talk about that. Maybe they're talking about salvation. Maybe it's a Bible verse that's talking about obedience to mom and dad. Maybe it's a Bible verse that's talking about kindness. And if with the siblings in the house, you can say, hey, here's how we can work on being kind. And then take that time and look at that verse, maybe even memorize it with them, and then see how you can incorporate speaking about that in your house. Let me encourage you another opportunity that you can do, is you can think about specific questions at specific times that you can try to train and encourage faith conversations. Now, when my children were younger, we attempted to have family altar. It wasn't every day, every night. A lot of people think that kids that grow up in a pastor's home, that they just come home, we put on our priestly robes, we sit around, read the Bible, and sing praises until we go to bed. That's not what happened. We would get together, and we had a lot of different things that we would do for family altars, but there'd be a lot of times that we'd forget. And we'd forget to have the family altar time. But one thing specifically happened when our children started getting older. There was rarely a time that they were all together. And so we tried a number of different ideas, and I could tell you a number of ways that we failed. I had this one idea. I thought, you know what, I'm gonna do something nice for my family and for my wife. I'm gonna cook breakfast, and we're all gonna eat breakfast together, because that was the one time we were all at home together. I'm gonna have this nice breakfast cook. It'll be nice for my wife. I can do a meal for her. Kids will all get together. And I had this picture in my mind. We're gonna be around the breakfast table. We're gonna be eating bacon and eggs, singing God's praises, talking about how wonderful He is. And didn't work. Failed miserably. To this day, my children and wife talk about the time that Dad drug everybody out at 3 o'clock in the morning and tried to feed them food and preach to them while they were all exhausted and tired. Now, I thought it was a great idea, but it failed. Didn't work. I thought, well, that's not going to work. What else can we do? So we tried to look for some other things to try to incorporate. And what we found is that when we all were in the car, headed for school, it could just be a crazy time of driving, finishing, getting ready for the day, or finishing your homework. But we tried to establish a time that, hey, we get in the car, we're going to have a conversation. And now what we did is we just shared what we were learning in our devotions. Sometimes that led into a talk that we could discuss about a particular thing. Sometimes we would just praise the Lord for a particular thing. We had 5 daughters. We had 5 trips to school. We jump in the car. Each daughter knew they had a day. They were going to pick a song. My family is musical. We like to sing. And so we would pick a song, and my teenager would pick a song that they like to sing, and then my 5-year-old would pick a song that they like to sing when it was their day. And we'd sing that in the van, and then we would talk about the Lord. And that was one of the few times that we were able to get together and speak. And when I say together, it was kind of rough on my wife, because she was not always riding to school with us, because I worked at the church where the kids went to school. So we weren't all necessarily together, but it was the closest thing many times that we got, the only chance that we got. And that turned out to be a thing that was regular and routine. And I can remember many, many years later, as my 5th daughter was a senior in high school, and she was saying, Dad, well, it's just us. What are we going to do? Well, we'd been doing it for years, so we started picking. We just went back and forth, and she picked a song and we sang it, then I picked a song and we sang it, and we talked about things that the Lord was teaching us. And it may sound awkward to you, and that's fine. The breakfast thing may work great for you. You may come up with something else. The key is not to try to imitate what other people are doing, but to try to find that place when you can establish that family momentum of speaking about Christ. And the interesting thing is, a couple of times my daughters have come back from college or been back at the house for something, and we were back in the car, and as we were taking off to go somewhere, it wasn't a school day because they weren't in school anymore. They had graduated from high school, but they weren't in school, but as we were going somewhere, they would say something that harkened all the way back to years ago when they said, "Okay, Dad, what song do you want to sing?" Or what verse are we going to talk about? And it was a sweet memory, something to think about. So let me encourage you to do that this week. Again, just really quickly, the steps. Think about what are the areas, what are the topics that you can talk about. Don't worry about if you don't know all of the answers to faith. Just, hey, what does my family need to talk about? Maybe you need to talk about encouragement. Maybe you need to talk about prayer. Maybe you need to talk about a particular question or apologetic thing that has come up. But determine the focus. And then look for an opportunity. Watch something with them. Listen to a podcast with them. Watch a YouTube channel. Listen to a song that they're listening to, and look for opportunities to bring that topic into that discussion. And if your kid brings up something that you don't know, we'll talk about that in weeks to come. Now, you can check in the show notes. We'll put some notes there, some ideas for discussion starters with your kids, some ideas for prayer starters to be able to kind of focus in on that. And if you have something that you'd like us to cover in Driving Faith, you can send an email. You can put a comment here on the YouTube channel, or you can send an email to drivingfaith411@gmail. Send that there and say, hey, this is something we'd like to cover, and we'll try to put it in the upcoming episodes. Thank you for your time. Love you. We'll be praying for you. Let's keep driving that faith.